Hey, everybody.
Hi.
This is our first ever live episode of
It's
the
inspired
Mormon
by
Marriages
waking up this morning and
podcast.
saying, hey, do you want to record a live episode on our Facebook page? We thought
Yeah.
it'd be a cool way to connect with some of you, just in case you're on Facebook right now. And if you're not, we'll send you the recording either via the podcast or we'll post it on YouTube or something like that.
So one thing we've been wanting to do a lot lately is episodes that we answer questions from our audience. We've done one episode like this before, and
we got pretty good feedback from it.
People enjoyed listening to it. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to answer a question from one of our listeners. So
what's the question?
Let's pull it on up. We will keep this
this
human
one comes
anonymous.
Through, I think, Instagram, right?
No, this is from an email.
Oh, yep. Okay.
You can ask us questions via Instagram, via Facebook, via email,
and we will
through
keep
the blog.
them anonymous.
Yes, we will keep your questions anonymous. So just to sum up a little bit about why this person asked this question, they felt like they had some habits in their relationship that were less than ideal. Like they were on their phones too much. They lacked friendship and connecting with other people. Too much consumables is what they said here. So this was the question. They said, how do you get a spouse on board with ideas and follow through? Do I just have to wait around until he's ready? I'm getting sick of waiting around for change, but also don't know how to go about it without him, as he's half of our relationship. So
I can relate to that.
This is a fantastic question. Are you being serious?
No, I just think it's a problem. I think it's a problem that we all run into at some point or another in our relationship. You want to do something better. You want to be better as a couple. You want something better in your marriage, and your partner's not ready to get on board with that change.
Mm-hmm. So the first thing that I wanted to mention with this question is that this particular listener is not alone in her feelings.
Absolutely.
I think that the more I read on marriage forums and things like this is a very common concern that comes up. So I just wanted to validate that concern just a little bit in that regards. And I also want to be really careful with this question because thanks, honey.
Yeah.
Some of the advice that I hear when people ask this question, I feel it can be a little bit less than helpful. Sometimes some of the responses I hear to this are, you need to set clear boundaries and have clear expectations with your partner and almost setting ultimatums if they don't follow through.
There's a very clear difference between an ultimatum and a boundary.
Right. And so something that we're going to talk about. That's all right, honey.
I'm still getting over bronchitis.
I love you and your bronchitis. Well, I don't love your bronchitis, but
Carry
with
on.
Your bronchitis. So something that we're going to address in this episode is the difference between an ultimatum and a boundary. I think it is important to set boundaries with your partner. But in that regards, you almost have to let go of an expectation of outcome along with that boundary.
Right. And we can dive into that in just a minute.
Right. And the other thing that I want to, we're also going to talk about in this episode is that this is also kind of a trick question because in reality, you can't control your spouse as much as you want to. Trying to control your spouse is setting yourself up for disappointment and setting them up for failure.
Well,
so
there goes the spoiler.
Spoiler alert.
But we are going to give you some really practical tips to try and influence them in a positive way. So
yes.
Even though you can't make, as you well know, you can't make choices for somebody that you love. You can't force them to do specific things. And typically, if you do force somebody to do something, you don't get a very good reaction. But we're going to talk about some ways where how you can inspire them and motivate them and lead them into maybe doing things that could help your relationship be better. But before we dive into that, I have a big question.
Okay.
So my big question is, I think before giving advice to people who might be in a position where they want their partner to be more on board with a specific change that they want to make in their relationship, the first question I think that's important to ask is, why wouldn't they be on board in the first place? What is it that's going on in your partner's world that is having them be checked out? What is it that's having them kind of resist getting on board with this change that is so obviously to you a positive change, a positive thing to do? So let's talk about that. What are some things that would have somebody check out of their marriage, not be investing, not be interested in making it better?
I think there are so many different things.
Which is why this is a hard question to answer, because it is different for
and
every
I
scenario.
think there's power in stepping into somebody else's shoes and trying to figure out their world. So one thing you could do is just ask them if they have anything going on in their life. But you can observe maybe they're really stressed with work.
Yeah. They could be depressed.
Maybe they're depressed.
They could be sick. I think one of the most difficult struggles to go through in a marriage is when a partner gets sick.
Mm-hmm.
And this happened to us 3 weeks ago,
right.
when I got bronchitis, and I was literally in bed all day, every day, just trying to heal, drinking fluids, drinking soup that Ange made me that was so delicious, and trying to get better. And I couldn't invest in the relationship the way that I wanted to, or especially the way that Ange really kind of craved. Mm-hmm. So that was difficult.
And I didn't really know how to approach it. This was something
it was hard for you.
We are both relatively healthy and we don't get sick very often. And so I didn't know how to approach the situation. And again, we bumped up into this issue.
So it could be sickness.
It
could be, I made a list here. It could be hormones.
Right.
It could be low self-esteem. It could be a lack of self-care. One that I think happens a lot is a lack of appreciation.
A lack of gratitude.
I think if somebody feels like no matter what they do, they're going to fail, there's never good enough, they stop trying. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times, if you're in a relationship and you've started to parent your partner, if you started to act as your partner's mom or dad and just constantly letting them know all the ways in which they're defective and they're not measuring up and never really appreciating the things that they bring to your life, they start to feel like, well, why would I even put in an effort? Why would I even try if everything that I do isn't good enough?
And they may do that subconsciously.
Yeah, it may not even be a conscious choice.
Right, it may not be an active choice
they're making.
But why do the dishes if I'm just going to be told that I'm doing them wrong?
Exactly.
Right.
So any sort of life transition could be a reason that they might be checked out right now.
A recent move.
Moving recently, losing a job.
Getting a new job.
A loved one.
Getting a promotion. It doesn't have to be negative things either. It can be positive things.
How about just physical or emotional exhaustion?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That could be a reason to check out.
Right.
Anyway, so the point here is that there are many, many, many reasons that your partner might not be engaging with you in a way that you would really like them to.
And it's probably not the story that you're telling yourself.
It may not be the reason that you're telling yourself. So
right.
It's worth having a conversation and saying, hey, I've noticed lately you have not been yourself. You know, when we were dating or the last couple of years we were married and you were like really showing up and it seemed like you were really excited about life. And it seems like the last couple of months you've just been, I don't know, not quite yourself. Can you tell me what's going on? You know, are you okay?
Right.
Is there something that you need that would help you kind of get back to your old self again?
Something we say a lot in our marriage and when we're giving advice to others is seek to understand before being understood.
That's one of the 7 principles, the 7 habits for highly effective people, isn't it?
Covey's. Is it Covey's or is it
Covey's.
The Gottmans? Is it Covey's?
Yeah, seek first to understand before being understood.
The Covey's and Gottmans because they're both 7. I get them mixed up. But seek to understand before being understood. I think sometimes we crave being understood. So we try and explain ourselves to our partner.
And you want your partner to go, oh, you know what? You're right. I have been checked out. I'm just going to flip this little switch in my life and suddenly be the 5-star husband that you really want me to be.
So one of the first things that you can do is, like Nate said, just sit down and start asking questions. And ask them with the desire of really getting inside your partner's world, really getting to know what's going on in their life, and not with an agenda. Don't ask them questions to try and like manipulate an answer out of them. Ask them questions to really try and understand what they're going through.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Something else that you can do that can help your partner maybe check in and get more invested in the relationship is to take some take some time to self-reflect and think about what it is specifically that you're focusing on. So are you, this is an interesting thing to think about, but there's two ways to approach change. Well, I love this quote by Simon Sinek. He wrote the book Start With Why. And he says there's two ways to influence human behavior, through inspiration or through manipulation. And
what's the difference between the two?
Yeah. So I think sometimes when we want our partner to do something differently than the way they're doing it, or do more of something or less of something, the easy thing that we do is we criticize. We focus on the things that they're doing bad to try and show them what our experience is like, to show them how bad they're being so that they will change their behavior. We expect that our criticism is going to have them go like, oh, you know what? You're right. I have been checked out. I have been watching too much ESPN, or I have been spending too much time on Instagram. You know what? Tell me more. Tell me more about things that I'm doing wrong so that I can become a better partner. I'd love to hear more about your experience of me being a terrible partner. You know, it doesn't happen that way. It just is less likely to yield good results. To inspire somebody, sometimes what you need to do is, instead of focusing on what's not working, is to instead paint a vision of what your life can look like if they were to make some small changes, and say things like, you know what, I would really love to be more connected to you. So maybe like in our evenings, and you don't have to say this part, but in your brain, you can say, instead of sitting down and watching Netflix every night after dinner, maybe tonight we could go for a walk and just hold hands, and maybe we could both leave our cell phones at home so we could just have a conversation without distractions. That, to me, is focusing on something that your partner could get on board with. It's an opportunity for them to succeed instead of something that they've already done in the past that they could fail. You're focusing on something future that you can control, that you and your partner can control. You're being clear about what you want, and you're setting them up to be a success.
Right. I think we should reiterate this because this is really important. If you're focusing on what's been done in the past and you're talking with your partner about things that they've done in the past, they can't do anything about that. What's done is done. They can't control that. And because they can't control that, that will probably give them feelings of hopelessness and shame.
Yeah.
But
and that's when you get people who get defensive and say things like, I guess I'm just a terrible husband. I guess I'm just a failure of a wife. I'm just never going to be good enough. And you start getting these self-defeating thoughts when you focus on what hasn't worked in the past.
So one thing you can do instead of that is, instead of focusing on what you don't want that's been done in the past, you focus on what you do want in the future. And that's difficult. It's difficult to ask for what you want instead of focusing on, it's easier to focus on what you don't want, because then you have to admit that there is something that you want and you may not possibly get it.
Yep.
So focus on what you do want in the future, because that's something that they can control. And
paint the picture, not passive aggressively, but in a way that gets your partner excited to participate in what it is you want to do. Another thing that would be a change of focus is a change of focus on what you can control and what you can't control. So a lot of the time I'll hear somebody say like, oh, I just want to do scriptures and prayer, but my wife just is not interested. Or I'd really like to exercise together, but my husband is just never wants to exercise, doesn't like running, doesn't like any of the things I like to do, just not interested. You know, and a lot of times we focus on, oh, I can't do this because my partner isn't investing.
Right.
But if you want to do scriptures and prayer together as a couple, then you instigate it. Like a lot of the time we think we're just waiting for our partner. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, my partner's just boring. Like they never want to do anything. And I'm like, well, if you're bored in your marriage, it's probably because you also are boring. A lot of the times the things that we accuse our partner of not doing are also the things that we are not doing. Shall we read that quote by Elder Maxwell? Yeah. Do you have it handy? Yes. So this is a quote that Nate sent me a long time ago. It's from Elder Maxwell's book, A More Excellent Way. And I heard about it through the Leading LDS podcast. So that's where I discovered it. Shout out to them. So this is kind of a hard one to take. It takes some self-reflection. So just prepare yourself a little bit. This is what it says. It says, one wonders if the tolerance of unnecessary mediocrity in others isn't, at some deep level of consciousness, a way of protecting ourselves or excusing ourselves for our own personal mediocrity.
In human relationships, there are too many tacit, silent deals in which one person agrees not to demand full measure, if the other person will agree to mediocrity when excellence may be possible. Let me read that again. Let me read that
It's Elder
sentence
Maxwell.
again. In human relationships, there are too many tacit, silent deals in which one person agrees not to demand full measure, if the other person will agree to mediocrity when excellence may be possible. There we go. That sounds a little bit better.
Okay, what does that quote mean to you?
So what that means to me is sometimes we one thing that I think of is we say this a lot. We say oh, it just left my brain. Oh, it takes two people to keep the status quo.
Yeah.
So we hear this all the time. It takes two people to tango. Like even in this question that this listener asked, she said, how do I go about doing it when he's the other half of the relationship? We're two people trying to do this together. We're stuck. But here's the thing. If you've got two people standing, let's take the two to tango idea. If you've got two people standing, staring at each other and neither of them are dancing, well, then nobody's going to dance. But if one person starts dancing, then the other person is more likely to start dancing as well.
The likelihood of the other person dancing goes away.
So if you would like to change something in your relationship, but you're waiting on your spouse to do it, then nothing is ever going to happen. And you both are just going to be living in this state of
non-action.
Inaction,
I think is the right word.
But so just like this quote says, we kind of allow other people to be mediocre,
so we can get by with being mediocre too.
Get by with being mediocre. But if you change, that either forces your partner to adapt to that change or to wave to you as you leave in the distance. I don't know.
That's a scary thing.
It's a scary thing.
Well, the other thing to take it that I love about this quote is that you can't insist on excellence from somebody else if you are showing up as mediocre. Mm-hmm. That's not fair. True. It's not fair for me to demand excellence from Angeline if I'm only showing up with 50% and I want her to show up with 100. Like that's not how relationships work. So I think a lot of times, and not all the time, but a lot of times in relationships, the thing that we complain most about with regards to our partner is oftentimes one of the things that we struggle with the most.
Key example in our relationship is with cell phones.
I don't struggle with this.
So one thing that we're constantly arguing about is the use of cell phones in our relationship. When one person is on their cell phone and the other person isn't, it's easy to get really upset at the other person. You threw me off. What's going on?
Sorry, I just noticed you keep looking down here.
Oh, everybody's sorry.
Right here.
Hi, everybody. Hi. So I get really upset with Nate when he's on his phone. He gets really upset with me when I'm on my phone. The thing that I get upset with Nate about is the thing that I need to be doing better at. Does that make sense?
No, tell me more.
So when I get really angry at Nate for being on his phone, subconsciously, I have a goal to be better at not being on my phone when I'm with Nate. And so when he does it, when he's with me, I get really angry.
Makes you feel...
And it makes me also feel a little validated because he's doing it.
So I can do it more?
No. But this is just a prime example of how sometimes we get after our partner for doing the thing that we want to be better at.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I kind of talked through that a little. Okay.
I've been there.
Yeah.
So that's a good question to ask yourself. Can I do better am I the person who could do better in this area before I ask my partner to do better? And we kind of just talked a little bit about waiting for your partner to take action. What about, what would you say about people who are like chasing down their partner and kind of nagging them or pressuring them to take action?
So we talked about this a little bit, but
already?
No, before we hit record.
Oh, okay.
Me and you talked about this already. But there's a video that we both really love on YouTube called 7 Ways to Maximize Misery. And it's
That
this
sounds like a weird video to love.
it's the cynical cartoon that essentially tells you the opposite thing of what you should do if you want to be happy. It tells you the things you should do if you want to maximize your misery. And chances are you're doing at least 2 or 3 of these things.
Probably
Let's be
more.
honest. When I watched this video, I was doing practically every single one of them and
you're
realized that I was
miserable.
making myself miserable. But one of the things that it says is to pursue happiness directly, to do everything you can to pursue it directly. So
that will maximize your misery.
And that will maximize your misery. So the analogy that they said is if you want to catch a bird, if you are actively pursuing this bird, chances are, like, have you seen people try and catch a chicken by running after it and trying to catch it? Like, just look this up on YouTube. It's almost impossible to catch a chicken if you're running after it. Like, it's going to elude you. The more you run after it, the more you chase it, the more it's going to get around you, and the more you're not going to get it. And it's the same with a bird. The more you try and chase it, try and catch it with a net. Well, you know what I mean. A different kind of bird. But instead, if you build a birdhouse and put some nice bird feed in there and make it all nice and cozy and then walk away, chances are the bird's just going to come and land there. And that's the same thing. So
explain how that would look inside a marriage.
So, okay.
Instead of saying what?
So let's do the opposite. Actively trying to get your spouse to change.
In what way? Like, let's use a specific example.
Okay, let's just take the scripture reading idea. If you are constantly after your spouse saying, we need to read scriptures together, we never read scriptures together. I want to read scriptures with you, but if I instigate it, then I don't know if you want it. So I want you to instigate reading the scriptures. So that's just kind of a common thing that happens. And the more you are actively telling them what they need to do, the more they're going to elude you.
The more they're going to resist.
The more they're going to resist. Nobody likes to be told everything that they're doing wrong, and nobody likes to be told what to do.
Especially in a partnership.
Right.
You don't want to be treated like a slave or a child or
you don't want to be treated
employee.
Like a child. And your responsibility in a partnership is to be their lover, not to be their mother. So that's just something.
Let's make a t-shirt that says that.
Being a lover and a mother, they're not the same thing. So if you're being
for most people.
So oh my gosh. So let's just say if you're treating your spouse like a child, they're not going to treat you like their lover. That's just the way it is. There's nothing you can do to change that.
So what would it look like with the scriptures example to build the house and walk away?
So what you need to think of is setting your partner up for success and making it as easy and most comfortable and with the least resistance possible for them to do that. So maybe start reading your scriptures alone without them. If you want to do it in bed with them sitting next to you, start reading your scriptures and then show them a scripture that you really like, or you instigate it. Relinquish this control of feeling like they have to be the one to instigate it. You can be the one to instigate it.
With me?
Hey, let's read scriptures together. You know,
and then if they participate,
slather them with as much gratitude as you can muster. I hear all too often people say, why would I say thank you for that? It's their job. Or why would I say thank you for that? I don't know. It just makes me really sad.
When people withhold gratitude.
When people withhold gratitude for something, here's the thing. If you want more of something, reward gratitude that behavior. So if they participate with you in the scripture study, say, wow, I really loved that. That was really great. I felt so connected with you. Thank you. Thank you for reading scriptures with me. And that's it. Leave it at that. Don't talk about how you want more of that. Don't say, I wish we could do this more often. Just leave it at that. Say thank you and that's it. That would be an example of setting them up for success.
Love it.
Yeah.
What else we got in here? We talked about catching the bird. You said, talk about if you have a partner who is not getting on board with things that you think are important or that you want to do to improve your marriage, go back to what you were doing when you were dating.
Oh, yes. So this is also something I hear a lot, is that when a lot of times people complain about their spouse not being on board, they think, oh, they've changed. They're not the same person. This isn't the person that I married. But they are. They're still that same person. Just go back to what you were dating and think of the things that you specifically were doing while you were dating them. Again, don't go back to dating and think of all the things that they used to do that you loved. Go back and think of how you used to treat your partner when you were dating them. This is an example that we've had recently in our relationship. So, getting just a little bit personal, my love language is physical touch. I feel super connected with Nate with physical touch. I love this. He's filling my tank. So, one thing that I wanted more of in our relationship was more physical intimacy and more physical touch. And just like the example of reaching after the bird and trying to catch it, I was constantly telling Nate how much I wanted physical touch. And
I just want to kiss you. I just want to be close to you. I just want to cuddle you.
And I would say things like, why can't you instigate sex more? Or can we please have sex? Or, just things that wouldn't really give him the opportunity to pursue me. I was actively pursuing the bird in this situation. And I would think back to when we were dating, and I would think about how much he loved kissing me and how much he loved holding my hand and how much he loved being close to me and cuddling with me. And I would think, why has he changed? Why doesn't he do that anymore? And I started getting really upset about it, to be completely honest. And the story that I would tell myself was that he didn't love me as much as he used to. I would say he wasn't attracted to me like he used to be. I would tell myself that we would never have sex unless I initiated it. That was a story that I told myself.
False.
And so
it's not a true story.
And it was really affecting our chemistry. It was really affecting our physical connection. And I felt hopeless and I had no idea what to do. And then we had a conversation in therapy. We went to couples therapy for this. Well, not specifically for this, but it came up in couples therapy. And we started reflecting back on what life was like when we were dating. And I realized that when me and Nate were just dating and we had decided to wait until marriage, I would just flirt with Nate like no other, with no expectations. I was not flirting with him to get a certain outcome. I was flirting with him just because I thought he was super attractive and I loved spending time with him, and I loved physical connection. And I realized that I'd stopped flirting with Nate. After we got married and now we could have sex and it wasn't a big deal, I stopped flirting with him. And it was something so simple, this aha moment that no, Nate wasn't the one that changed. Maybe there were some things that he did, but I can't control Nate, so I'm not going to focus on that. I had stopped flirting. That's something I can control.
And it was contributing to the frustration and decline in our relationship.
I wanted to blame Nate for all this, but I was only making myself miserable. I was maximizing my misery because I can't control Nate. But when I made the conscious decision to start flirting more with Nate, that was something I can control. Did you get
more of what you wanted?
I did. It worked. It was so great. Just simple things like leaning over and biting his shoulder, or just giving him the sultry bedroom eyes, or, it was something so simple that was within my control.
And on my end, it was so awesome to experience my wife flirting with me again. And it made me want to pursue her.
Right.
Like she was giving me everything that I needed to give her what she needed.
Right.
And I felt like she was asking for things before, when she was like asking for more physical touch and more intimacy. She was asking for things without really setting me up for success. Mm-hmm. And it made it really difficult sometimes for me to give them, because I felt like I was giving from a place of obligation, or I was giving because I was told to give. And it's less fun to give somebody a gift if they're like telling you to give it to them.
Right.
Exactly. It's more fun when it's like a surprise and it's something that's given from a willing heart.
So this takes a lot of letting go of unnecessary control. And a word I like to use that a lot of people bristle at is the word surrender. You have to surrender unnecessary control. Surrender is not the same as submit, but there's a Sarah Bareilles song. Our friend Jessica mentioned this to me the other day. There's a Sarah Bareilles song where she says, surrender is just a word until you try it. And that is so true. I could tell women specifically to relinquish the control that they feel like they need to have over their husbands or things won't get done. And a lot of times they will tell me that that is just archaic and old-fashioned. But in reality, until you try it, you'll never reap the benefits. Here's an example. A lot of times women won't go out with their friends at night because they're afraid to leave their children with their husband. I've heard this. They're afraid to leave their children with their husband because they're afraid he won't feed them or
take care of them,
or take care of them, or put them to bed on time. And this is a real fear if you've conditioned yourself with this. But a lot of times they either won't do it, and so they lack that opportunity to spend time with their friends, or they'll do it, but they'll give their husband a specific checklist of every single thing that they need to do because they feel like if they don't say anything, nothing's going to get done. But here's the sad thing about that. If you don't ever give your spouse an opportunity to show you that he's trustworthy, you're never going to trust him. So
you should say that again.
If you don't give your spouse opportunities to be trustworthy, you are never going to trust them. If this has been years and years and years and years of this type of conditioning where you've conditioned yourself to believe that nothing will get done unless you say it, it's going to take a good 6 months to decondition yourself from that. So
it's going to be uncomfortable.
Right. So it's going to be so scary to relinquish that control. To say, you know what? I'm going to go out to dinner with my friends and I'm not going to give my husband any instructions. He can do it however he wants.
And I'm not going to check in on him. And I'm going to trust that if he needs something, he'll call.
Right.
And if he feeds the kids frozen pizza and puts them to get to bed 30 minutes late,
no one's going to die.
No one's going to die.
So here's another thing that will help you get what you want. Just say what you want, but then don't tell your spouse how to give it to you. Let them give it to you in the way that they're going to give it to you. And it's probably going to be completely different than what you expected. But they may surprise you.
Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah, in a small way.
I know I'm putting you on the spot.
Let's see. Yeah. This is a small, really funny example to illustrate this, but the underwear story.
All right.
So, there was a time when I was doing laundry and I was
early on in our marriage.
Early on, like super early on in our marriage.
We haven't been married that long, but
this was like months into our marriage. And I noticed that Nate's garments were getting a little grungy. And it's really important to me that we take care of our things. And it's really important to me to, take care of our clothes. And so I was going to go out and
it's important to her that her husband doesn't walk around with holes in his underwear is what she's saying.
I was going to go and I was going to go buy him new garments again, because in my brain, I was telling myself that if I don't go do it for him, he's not going to do it for himself. If I don't take control of this situation, then all heck's going to break loose.
Then I'm going to be walking around wearing like threadbare underwear.
Right. So, but I had recently read a book that had encouraged me not to do something for my husband that he could do for himself, not to mother him or treat him like a child. So I remember thinking about it and thinking, you know what? No one's going to die if Nate has holy underwear. And is this really that big of a deal? And I thought, you know what? No, I don't have to do this. I don't have to do this for my husband because he's a grown man and he's an adult and he can do it himself.
I am a grown man. Glad you noticed that.
And guess what happened 3 days later?
I bought my own underwear.
I hadn't said a word.
I did it myself.
I hadn't said a word about this to Nate. And when he walked in with 2 bags full of brand new garments,
Oh,
I
she
just
started laughing.
burst into laughter.
Yeah.
It was so hilarious to me that he actually did something for himself without me doing
I
it
do that
for
a
him.
lot.
So again, this is a hard, if you are like 10, 15, 20 years into your marriage and you've taught yourself to believe that nothing's going to get done unless you do it, either do it for your spouse or tell them what to do, it can be extremely scary to let go of that control. And chances are now your spouse is conditioned not to do anything until they're told either. And so
it takes a while to break out of that habit.
It's going to take a long time to break out of that
the situation
habit.
is like you want your husband to take out the trash. And in that case, leave the trash. Like leave it there. Leave it where it is, under the sink. Maybe it'll start to overflow and start to drive you nuts. Take a deep breath and lean into it. And if that's the job that he's agreed to take care of, let it overflow. Let it keep getting to the point where it starts to stink.
Them fail
and he
a
walks
little
in
bit.
and he goes, oh my gosh, what is that? And he looks under the sink and he sees the trash overflowing. And then he goes, and then squashes it down even further and like compacts it and then starts to add more trash on top. Like just let it add up until he finally drags the trash out to the trash can and throws it away and then go, hey, I noticed that you threw the trash out today. Thank you. I noticed that it was kind of bad down there and I really appreciate you taking care of it. The smell is gone. It looks nice and clean. It really means a lot to me. Right. It sounds so stupid, but your husband is going to be way more inclined, or your wife, to follow through and do their job, do what they're expected to do if they get rewarded for it, if they get a little praise, if they get a little appreciation. That's
the human part in us. We're more
That's
like
how humans work.
We're more likely to put effort into doing something if we
it doesn't make sense logically.
Acknowledged for it.
It doesn't make sense logically, but it does make sense emotionally. And relationships are more about emotion than they are about logic.
Right.
You can logically say he should do it because it's his job, or she should do it because it's her responsibility. But if you connect more with the emotional side of your partner, you're way more likely to be successful than if you try and just connect with the logical side.
Here's another example.
Yes.
A real life example. And this is something we've done in our marriage as well that I haven't really told you, but well, maybe we've talked about it a little bit.
I'm about to be surprised. I think.
Both Nate and I are backseat drivers. We like to tell each other how to drive sometimes. But I think we've gotten so much better at this because I found that when I am now in the passenger seat, I get to just sit back and relax and trust that Nate's going to get us where we need to go.
Even if it involves a couple of wrong turns.
Right. And honestly, this took conscious effort on my part. Like if we were going somewhere and he took a way that I wouldn't normally go, normally I'd be like, what are you doing? Where are you going? Why are you going this way? And he'd be like, could you just let me drive? You know, I'm sure this is a common thing. Or,
yeah.
Honey, there's a car coming.
I'm like, I see the car coming. I have mirrors. I'm paying attention to the road.
But for the last couple of years of our marriage, which is like practically our entire marriage, but I've consciously worked on not saying a word when Nate is driving. If it's apparent to me that we're going to get in a car accident because he didn't notice something, then I'll say something. But if he takes the wrong turn, I just keep my mouth shut. If he gets us completely and 100%,
I appreciate it because it lets me dig myself out of my own hole without her having to throw dirt on top of me and tell me what I'm doing wrong.
If he gets us completely and utterly lost, I giggle about it now instead of getting upset.
Which I don't. Have I ever gotten us completely and utterly lost?
No.
Just that one time when you're waiting to your grandma's house.
Right. But we got there.
Right instead of left.
We got there. We got to my grandma's house just fine, even though we were 5 minutes late.
Yep.
So again, it can be scary to relinquish that control.
I noticed this the other day.
You did?
Remember yesterday when I, like, same kind of principle, wasn't the exact same situation, but what did I ask you for? And you just said, okay.
You asked me to go get my headphones.
Oh, yeah. We were going to record, were we recording a podcast?
Yeah, we were on someone else's podcast.
Yeah, and she wanted to listen in. And so I'm like, hey, could you go grab your headphones off the couch? And she goes, sure. And I was like, she didn't ask why?
Because I had the habit of being like, why?
Why do you want me to go get that? Anyway, little thing.
Same thing when we were driving. Why are you going this way? What are you doing? Why are you doing that? Can you see how annoying that would be?
Are you sure you want to be in this lane? Don't you want to be over a lane? Watch out! Here comes a car. Here comes a car. You're merging. You're merging.
There's a person walking across the street a mile ahead of us.
Anyway,
but the benefit that I received out of that is this peace. I literally don't have to say anything to my husband while he's driving because I trust him that he's going to get us where we need to go, even if it's not the way that I would go.
I love you, honey.
I love you too. But I'm just saying, like, these are things that help to set your partner up for success. Relinquishing unnecessary control over the situation. And it seems counterintuitive, and it is counterintuitive.
But you won't know if it works unless you try. And
you
my guess is if
it.
you're experiencing these types of problems, you haven't tried this approach yet.
Right.
So try it for a couple months.
Do an experiment, and like we said, it could take up to 6 months. If your spouse has been conditioned to only do something if you've told them to, it
might take them
a while to actually do something.
Yeah.
And so if you give it a week and say, well, I didn't tell him to take out the trash and he never did it, well, that's not enough time. If you've told yourself you can't trust your spouse, it's going to take you, like we said, about 6 months in order to get that trust back.
Yep. So that sums up our advice for today.
Right.
Thank you for the question. We really appreciate it.
It was a fantastic question, and I loved it because it seriously is a question that so many people have.
And this is something that we could probably talk about for a really, really long time. And if you have thoughts or ideas on what somebody in this situation could do to get their partner on board with improving their relationship, somebody who might be a little bit resistant, might be dragging their feet, leave us a response. Like, leave your ideas in the comments below if you're on Facebook, or go to the blog post at mormonmarriages.com. When we post that, you can leave those comments, leave an idea down in those comments, or shoot us an email. I actually set up an email address for myself, Nate@mormonmarriages.com.
Ooh, I want one.
I know you do. So I'll try and set you up with one that says Angelin@mormonmarriages.com.
Good.
And let us know. Let us know your thoughts. We would love to hear them.
I think a good follow-up episode on this will be the difference between boundaries and ultimatums.
That's a great idea.
Because that's one thing we didn't get to, but we could literally talk about boundaries for an entire episode.
Yeah.
So let's make this
put
part
it on the
one.
to-do list.
Make this part one of this question. And part two is we'll talk about boundaries versus ultimatums.
Maybe we'll come back and do that next week live on Facebook.
And intention versus expectation.
Yes.
So this is our commitment to you. We will talk about boundaries and expectations.
But she's doing the Hinckley hack right now. Do you guys remember that? The Hinckley hack. Sorry. That is our promise.
That'll be part two.
Okay, we'll see you guys soon.
We'll do that next time. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.